Cawthron, the town historian, has written volumes of books on Woodbury and the development of the area here. Built this monument and contributed to the founders of Woodbury.
So I am the Pawtucket Princess, daughter of Chief Nanawak, Sachem of the Pawtucket natives of Pomprog. My father was no longer a young man when the white settlers started to take our land, and they took our land by force. Our people were not warlike, so there was nothing we could do. So my father was obviously sad about this. So one night he went up to the Nanawak Falls, which are now in the Bethlehem line, and he sang of his sadness, and he could not bear to watch his land be taken anymore. So he hurled himself off of the falls and died.
Oh,
He was
that's
buried in
sad.
the manner of a chieftain, and his gravestone was marked by stones bypassing natives in war and peace. And for many years he rested there peacefully until the stones were taken away because somebody wanted to put a farm there. And so now I'm here to tell his story.
I was Lydia Bacon, wife of the legendary Jabez Bacon, a self-made merchant who became the richest man in Connecticut and a millionaire. Jabez and I, in 1758, bought a piece of land down on Holland Road and built a fine, large home. Our wonderful home was always filled with our children and visitors. We often had neighbors and the Yankee peddlers and customers for the shop and our well-to-do friends in for dinner in our beautiful candlelit dining room. I entertained many, many dinners at our candlelit. I spent many happy years there with Jabez. When I was in my 60s, my heart gave out and I died. I was buried up in the Woodbury Cemetery on the hill, not far away, with my wonderful children whom I so loved, and my wonderful Jabez, not far from the house that I spent a wonderful life in.
I am the Reverend John Rutgers Marshall, and I was the first Episcopalian priest here in the town of Woodbury. I was born in New York City and educated at King's College in New York, which today is Columbia University. My wife and I came to Woodbury in 1771. At that time we had 2 children, 1 on the way, and 2 slaves. My tasks at Woodbury were twofold. The first was to administer to my parishioners not just in Woodbury, but also in Southbury and Oxford. The other task that I had was to educate some of the young boys here in the town of Woodbury, right here in this room at the Glebe House. Things changed dramatically worse for our family during the Revolutionary War. Because of my background, some of the folks in Woodbury assumed that I was for the king and not for the revolution. And I was put under house arrest, I was beaten and punished and it was a very, very hard time for us. By that time, we actually had 9 children. Unfortunately, because of the hardships and illness and suffering that I had during the Revolutionary War, I died relatively young, at the age of just over 40, leaving my wife to take care of things just alone with our 9 children.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bryan Marshall, and my father and I went from Milford, Connecticut to New York City in 1761. My father was a wealthy merchant, and that's how I met John. His family were also merchants. His aunties had taken over the family business. We moved up here, and it was cold and it was dark, and we had a lot of work to homeschool 9 children. Can you imagine? Poor John died. I had to leave the Glebe house, and fortunately I was able to go and live with one of my daughters. John and I are buried behind the church, but our children are buried on the other side of the cemetery, so we don't get to see them very often.
I am Moll Kramer, the witch of Woodbury. I was the wife of Adam Kramer, Woodbury's blacksmith in 1776. Anyone who knew me, including my husband, feared me and avoided my wrath. When my husband was unlucky enough to find me in a foul mood, he would be unable to craft anything or shoe any horse. If a neighbor or housewife denied me something, I would put a curse on their home so that nothing would go right for them. I put a curse on one woman so that her milk would never churn into butter until the evil in it was vanished. When my own husband denounced my son and I as being familiar with Satan, I built a house for the 2 of us on Good Hill. Some thought my son to be bewitched as well. I placed a curse on the town of Woodbury so that it would be forever plagued by thunder and lightning. To this day, Woodbury has some of the most fantastic thunderstorms in the area.
I am Catherine Remember Baker, and I was a soldier during the French and Indian War. My head, right hand, and toes were cut off and sent as trophies to Quebec, Canada. There was a 50-pound price on my head. My son had a similar fate just before the Revolution. He was on Mine Hill, and Abram Hurlbut, who was hunting for wild turkeys, and Abram got a glimpse of my son's head, aimed, and fired. My son fell dead out of the tree.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Chapin. I was born December 27, 1904, and died May 10, 1944, at the age of 39. The journey to my final resting place, however, took 65 years. It all started in 1942 when I joined the American Red Cross as a correspondent in their communications department. You could say that traveling was in my blood. Before I joined the Red Cross, I worked for Macy's as a home furnishings buyer in Europe. My job with the Red Cross was to report on our war efforts and the Red Cross's efforts in the war to our readers back at home. In the era of no television and certainly no internet, this was the primary means of communication. In 1943, my assignment was to report about stories of our U.S. forces fighting in North Africa against the Nazis. On May 10, 1944, I was leaving Africa and headed to Naples, Italy. I boarded a B-25 military plane that was making a routine run between islands to deliver some mail. The weather that day, the fog was as thick as pea soup. Sadly, our plane crashed in a barren mountainside somewhere in Italy and exploded. There were no survivors. Fast forward to 1989. A Corsican villager who had witnessed our plane crash in 1944 as a young boy had said that he saw other villagers burying our remains in those crevices that were scattered across the mountainside crash site. Our remains were recovered and brought to the United States Central Identification Lab at Hickams Air Force Base in Hawaii. After many years of research and DNA analysis, the State Department contacted my family in 2005 to confirm my identity. With the efforts of my family and the help of the State Department and the Red Cross, I was brought back home and laid to rest here in Woodbury with my parents in 2009. My last will and testament said, "I have little to leave behind except my love." Well, I am so grateful to my descendants for the love they have given me in return.
Draw near to hear my story. It is a sad story, but I assure you it is all true. In life, my name was Jules Rouglé, but no one knew me by that name. I was known as the Leather Man for the leather outfit that I wore. Some people said that I never really existed, that I was a myth, a story, a legend. But I can assure you, I was a very real person. I was born in Lyon, France, and as a young man, I became a skilled wood carver. I fell in love with the daughter of a local leather merchant and hoped to marry her. I went to work for her father, trying to impress him, and he allowed me to run part of his business. For a while, things went very well. Then, sacre bleu. The market collapsed, and I lost the family fortune. And when I lost the family fortune, he disallowed the marriage, and some people said I lost my mind. I began to wander around France, cursing, muttering, talking to myself. They put me in a sanitarium, but I escaped, and I made my way to the New World. I arrived in New England in 1858, and I began my journey here. I would walk from the Connecticut River to the Hudson River and back, a continuous loop of 365 miles every 34 days. Some people said that I did this to walk off the guilt of losing the family fortune. Other people said I did it because I was crazy. Other people said my movements were so precise they could set their clocks and their calendars by me. I avoided major roads and took the side roads. I came through Watertown and Woodbury many, many times. Some people were kind. They would leave food and tobacco and provisions for me. Other people, they would chase me away. Madman, beggar, thief, be gone. We'll get the authorities after you. My life was one of extreme loneliness. I had no spouse. I had no companion on my journey. I was always alone. I never learned to speak English too well, so I couldn't talk to people along the way. Life was difficult. You try walking in August with 60 pounds of leather on your back, or sleeping in the open with just a blanket in January. In 1889, I got caught in a blizzard and I began to slow down. When they found my body in the springtime, they determined that I had died from blood poisoning, from cancer of the mouth. All those years of chewing tobacco. I am buried in Sparta Cemetery in Ossining, New York. Or am I? Maybe I was just a legend, a myth, a story after all.